I have to be powerful. Right? In other words, a person who's imbued with spirit has to be power hungry. If you are not power hungry, you are not a spiritual person. Clear? It's a shocking statement. If you're not power hungry, you are unspiritual, you are unkind, you are closed. People who are not power hungry are not spiritual. I stand by that sentence. And we are on the move. So, friends, community, friends, Romans, and countrymen, and country women, let's lend each other our ears, because the Dharma, the goddess, the band of outrageous lovers is on the move. So we're taking a next step, and it's a wildly important next step. And I want to share with you a little bit what's going on. So we'll just kind of locate ourselves as we set our intention here in One Mountain, Many Paths. And I want to say just a couple of things that kind of locate us in what we're doing here. And we have a huge new Dharma, new chapter in the story of value that we're writing together, which is about our personal story and the cosmic story. And we're going to hear about that in our Evolutionary Love Code, which Lady Jacqueline will be resonating today. But first, I just want to just take a second to set our context if you're new, right? Or if you're old, right? Because context setting is not for new or old. It's when we reset, we press reset, we say, who are we? We re-answer the question of who am I and who are we, and where are we and what's there to do, right? So where are we? So you can only answer that question in the context of the universe. The universe always has to come first. You can't answer a personal question independently of a cosmic question. So the answer to the question of where am I? Where are we? The universe story is everything. So that's one. So stay close. Let's go. We're so deep in together. So the beginning of where are we is the universe story, but even in the very words of the universe story, there's the word story. And just by saying the universe story, we've already answered a huge part of the question, which is the universe is a story. And the universe is not merely a fact. The universe is a story. Okay, can we stay really close? I mean, this is so important and so beautiful and so directly in response to the meta crisis of our time, which appears to be a meta crisis of resources, of infrastructure, right, of social structure, extraction models, exponential growth curves falling off, runaway AI, which is lacking social structures to hold it. So runaway infrastructure without appropriate social structure. But at its core, the meta crisis of our time is a crisis of meaning. It's a crisis of value. It's a crisis of intimacy. It's a crisis of relationship. Or said slightly differently, it's a crisis of story. And that's what I mean when I've tried to say tenderly, my friends, for the last decade, we live in a time between stories. And in a time between stories, we have to play a larger game. And the playing a larger game is to birth a new human and a new humanity. And we do that by telling the next articulation, the next best version, the 4.0, the best version of the universe story. And the key to the universe story is to realize first that the universe is a story. There's a narrative arc to Cosmos, right? And I tried to write this the very first time in the year 2000, 1999, in the fourth section of a book called Soul Prints. And the fourth section was called Live Your Story. But it began with the structure of reality, a story. So that's a big deal. Okay, reality is a story, and my story participates in the universe story. So the universe is not empty and bleak. It's nonsense. The universe is not nonsense. The universe is sensual. The universe is embedded with story, which means that the universe is embedded with language. The universe is linguistic at its very core. Language is structural to reality as story is structural to reality, and story evolves. So we gather around the campfire and we tell the best story we know based on the best validated insights using language to articulate language, which is structural. The code of reality is language. And language tells stories, which is why language, linguistics, births the movement from all of the different Homo families. Anthropologically, we come to Homo Neanderthal and then Homo sapien, and the unique quality is the capacity for language, which is the capacity for storytelling. At every crisis in history, when we go deep into the nature of the crisis, it's a crisis of story. We solve the crisis by creating new sets of relationship, meaning new stories of intimacy. So every crisis is a crisis of intimacy, and it's a new story of intimacy that resolves the crisis. We birth a new level of evolutionary intimacy. That's the nature of reality. So we can't address the question of where am I without knowing what's the universe story. But the beginning of knowing the universe story is that the universe has a story. And then who am I? Who are we? Let my story and our story participates is chapter and verse. Chapter and verse in evolution, the love story of the universe. You know, I shared this idea with my dear friend Ervin Laszlo back in 2014. And it's just completely animated his perspective. He'd been thinking about this in his own way for 40 years. He said, oh, the universe is a love story. And he wrote me, a couple of years ago, yes, evolution, the love story of the universe. Yes, right? And Ervin's been thinking about it since he wrote a book in 1972, which was the preeminent book on systems theory. And although systems theory can be wrongly understood if you reduce it to a materialist science, it's actually not. Systems theory is actually trying to trace the stories of intimacy that define reality all the way down and all the way up the evolutionary chain. So who am I? Who are we? We are chapter and verse. My story participates, is a chapter in the universal love story. Now stay close. So we're just setting our intention. We're just saying, hello, I'm so tears in my eyes, ecstatic to be with you, because the way we're going to respond to the meta crisis, which is trillions, the meta crisis is the potential death of humanity or the potential death of our humanity. Now, when I wrote this a decade ago, Zach Stein and I wrote an article on the second shock of existence, which is the first shock of existence is the realization at the dawn of history of the potential death of the human being. And the second shock of existence is the potential death of humanity, which based on all the objective structures is a genuine possibility. Right? When I said this 10 years ago, people just kind of looked at me. A little pat on the head. Yeah, tell us about unique self, Gafni, right? You're really good at Dharma. What are you doing? And then people kept patting me on the head, and I kept being up in the middle of the night saying, oh my God, what do you do when you can see a train coming that's about to crash into a bus full of school children, and you don't know how to stop the train? So that's how I feel on lots of nights. And then at some point, gradually it dawned, how do we stop the train? We stop the train, not by, right? You need infrastructure. Let's stop the train. But you need to do more than that to stop the train. You've got to actually tell a new story of value. That to stop the train of the political, social, and economic models, right, upon which reality is grounded today, you've got to say, okay, what's the source of those models, right? What's the ground of those models? And you got to change the model themselves, not by declaring a new model to be true, but by actually showing, based on weaving together the validated insights from pre-modern, modern, and postmodern wisdom streams, weaving them together and telling a new story of value that's never been told before, but that's self-evidently true because it gathers together the best knowings that we have about reality. You tell a new story of value, and it's only a new story of value that changes the vector of history itself, right? And then that then begins to address, okay, what's there to do today? What's there to do? So as a collective, what's there to do is to tell that new story of value. And it's the overwhelming moral imperative of this time is to tell a new story of value and to participate in that. And it's not, and I say to people close to me all the time, and it's not to do this little project in your life, which is a new coaching project or this project or that. Do all those things. They're all great. But actually wake up to what this moment of time is. What's the unique moment in time? We actually have a global civilization with exponential technologies, which is a self-terminating system, and the cries of trillions of unborn children who have no voice in the present, right, are crying to us, and we are their voice. The only voice of the future is those of us who can listen in and hear the call of the future. Our own future selves are those children. I want to get this point, right? Our story doesn't end in our death. Death is a night between 2 days. There's an enormous amount of information, empirical information, that tells us that consciousness is fundamental, and consciousness is the field of desire and consciousness is always structured as story. So the story of my life doesn't end at my death. It goes on. And my story can only be liberated in the ongoing cycle of stories. So I exist in the future. Does that make sense? I'm saving myself, right? Because my story goes on. Right? It's why all the great interior sciences had empirical information about, for example, reincarnation. Whoa, did he just go woo-woo? No, I didn't just go woo-woo. Right? We know each other. We trust each other, right? I don't go woo-woo. I don't believe in woo-woo. I hate woo-woo, right? Reincarnation is actually, there's an enormous amount of empirical validated information on this notion. University of Virginia, Ian Stevens did decades of empirical work on it. My friend Michael Murphy funded a lot of the work, he told me, and his students have gone on. We actually have an enormous amount of information, validated and empirical information, which shows that reincarnation is the best hypothesis to explain an enormous amount of empirical evidence. But it also is the right core understanding of reality. My story's not over when it's over. How many people have ever been at a deathbed? I've been at a lot of deathbeds. I've lost lots of people who are 18 years old who are close to me as students when I lived in the Middle East. Now, I know death well. Most of my family was killed in the middle of their lives. My parents' generation, my grandparents in Europe. Death is clearly not the end of a story. That's just not the case. You're often in mid-story, you're in mid-language sentence, right? So the language of your life goes on. And so I am the future generations. Do you understand that? And as I'm in mid-play. So we need to create the future for all the future generations who we love madly. We've got to envision them and see them and hear their cries, and then also know that those are our cries. We're those babies. Like, wow. So what's there to do? So the overriding moral imperative of this generation. I was talking to my dear friends Shahad and Claire the other day, and we were talking about this. The overriding moral imperative of this generation, if you're an awake and alive human being, is to participate in the creation of the new story of value. And we all have different roles in that, and it's not a guru's job. A guru can't do it. It's got to emerge out of a unique self-symphony, right? Our what there is to do to play my role in the unique self-symphony. The guru model is dead. Right? Yes, there should be teaching. There should be authority. Authority means, right, someone who knows more physics than I do has more authority than I do in physics. I don't say, oh, great, we have equal authority in physics because we're woke in new age. No, right? We develop authority by working hard. I was talking to my friend Elena the other day, we were doing a study session, and she was talking to me about linguistics and mathematical models and Chomsky and language. She has more authority than I do in that area, right? So I'm so excited to listen to her, right? Right. So what's there to do? To tell the new story of value, right? It's crazy exciting. It's wildly exciting, and it's the moral imperative of this moment in time, okay? Okay. Can I just laugh with you for a second? Is it okay? People tell me all the time, Mark, would you just calm down? Talk slowly with long pauses between words, and people will think this is very wise. Really? That is so boring. Of course, I'm excited. And I'm completely fearless and completely afraid. I'm terrified. I'm fucking terrified at what could happen. And I'm ecstatic at the possibility of speaking in and participating together and writing this new story of value. And I believe in the best of humanity. I trust humanity. And I trust a God-infused humanity and a humanity-infused God, right? Because we're partners. We're inter-included. So we're here to tell that new story of value. And that new story of value, friends, are we together? It has a Dharma and it has a yoga. And today I'm looking at the time. Okay, it's perfect. It's 1:26. It has a Dharma and a yoga. And Dharma is the actual strands of the new story. And yoga is the practice that you do to invoke the new story. Okay. So first, I just want to share something, if I can, with permission. So we're doing a mystery school this summer. We've done it. This is the 10th year. Shahati and I started it together, and then Claire Shahati and I stepped in and did it for a whole bunch of years together. And Christina Kincaid flew over every summer to kind of be present and to hold it, right? And we held it together. And this year the mystery school has been passed, right? Shad and Claire and Christina will be there deeply with me partnering it, but it's been passed to Krista, who's kind of holding that space with Menka. We're wildly excited. We call them the sisters because they happen to be sisters. And we're wildly excited to come together, and that's August 21st through the 25th. We have room for 100 people. I think we're at like 80 now or something like that, but it's like 100 people, exactly, not more. We're going to come together and we're going to go deep into the next piece of the next story, right? So that's one. So that hopefully that's in the chat box and you'll get emails on it. Right? Can I just be like rude for a second? Get off your butt and come. Right? Get a ticket. It's an inexpensive ticket. Right? The whole thing's low ticket price. Right? It's not a we're not making money on it. Right? We're just gonna, pay the essential people, the venues, et cetera. But it's a very, very important deep place of practice. And every great mystery school that created a new story had a place of practice. So that's one. Two, we want to like madly, wildly up level one mountain, take one mountain to the next level. And Jamie and Lady Jacqueline and Ujis kind of clipping with us at different wonderful times, and Christina Amelon, right? And Krista, right? And in other words, the core inner team kind of holding one mountain, right? We're ready to take this to the next level. And we're not going to turn it exactly into a podcast. There are podcasts in the world. But this is a service. This is where we do Dharma, where we do yoga, right? And the yoga is we practice, we chant. And every week we get together and we do some practice. We do some songs, some prayer. And prayer is wildly important. So prayer means that I feel the infinity of intimacy of reality, and I feel its aliveness, not a puppet God, not an old man with a long white beard or a hot woman, right? Kind of who's the goddess. No, it's the personification of the yin and the yang, right? The line and the circle, the masculine and feminine forces of reality, which are both impersonal, meaning they're forces, but they're also fully personal. At the deepest level of the subtle structures of reality, you can't actually split between the personal and the impersonal, which is why Richard Feynman, the physicist, or Stuart Kauffman, right, the complexity theory cosmologist, mathematician, talk about there being first person in reality and I in reality all the way down to the atomic level. Now, the I might be a little bit different than my I. There's an evolution of I, but there's a personhood to reality, right? So that's prayer. Prayer is I speak into the field of personhood, and the field of personhood hears me, just like I hear you, right? I'm an expression of the field of personhood. I'm an expression of the intelligence of reality. The field hears you. That's called prayer. So this is all part of what happens, right? So that yoga is part of the prayer, and chant, right? Prayer is part of the yoga, and chant is part of the yoga, right? So we're doing Dharma and yoga, or another way to say that is first practices and first principles. Okay, so I'm excited, right? We're the holy band gathering. Now you might say, okay, is he being pretentious, grandiose? No, accurate. That's what Margaret Mead meant when she said, if you doubt that a small group of madly committed people, she didn't say madly, she said committed, but I added madly. If you doubt that a small group of madly committed people can change the world, no, only small groups of madly committed people ever change the world. Change happens on the periphery and the edges, then moves to the center. But first, you've got to create a strong, deep, lived experience of the new story. We have to become the new story. We have to literally cross to the other side, right? Barbara and I used to say to each other all the time, have you crossed over? Have you crossed to the other side? We have to cross to the other side. And we're starting in Europe a public event, not a kind of small elite private event, which is Mystery School, which is why I would recommend everyone come first. But we're starting also a public event called The Crossing, which I'll be, I think, in April this year, for 400 or 500 people, which is a kind of a beginner's event just to taste this idea. I'm crossing to the other side and becoming the new human, becoming the new humanity. It's an actual evolution of what it means to be a human being. Now, you might think, again, is he being fanciful and utopian and crazy? No, I'm actually relating the nature of history. The nature of history is that actually, when there's a crisis, the crisis is always a crisis in story. It's a story about who am I? Who are we? What's our universe story? And then we respond by up-leveling our understanding of who we are. Our narrative, our story, our universe story, our story of identity, our story of desire, our story of power. Right? That's what we're here to do. So we got to live that. We live that together at the Mystery School. We live that together on One Mountain. We live that together, right? We're having a meeting of kind of the inner kind of gang. We call it a board meeting, but it's not really a board meeting, which is going to be the last weekend in June. Right? And by the way, I just want to say something about the board meeting. We have place open for 2 guests, right? Who could come up to St. Johnsbury. And if you're interested in being one of those 2 guests, but here's the criteria. It's for someone who wants to actually step in a major way and get involved in some concrete, real way in the future in the work. So we have, invitation for 2 guests. If you're interested in being one of those 2 guests and you want to step in a very, very real way, a substantive way, right? Then write me directly, write Krista, right? And we'll do a quick phone conversation just to see if it's the right fit. Right, so we have 2 places open for the summer, 2 guests to be at our board retreat this summer on June 30th, July 1st, and July 2nd. Okay, but it's not a kind of retreat, and it's not a public retreat. It's for people who are kind of deeply, we're putting our hands in the center and we're saying, we want to be a band of outrageous lovers. We want to love each other outrageously and tell this new story of value. Right? Have you ever heard of the Vedas in Hinduism? Who wrote the Vedas? A band of outrageous lovers. You ever heard of the Bible? Who wrote the Bible? Right? The divine voice speaking through a band of outrageous lovers. Right? That's how everything's written. Great literature is bigger than a person. Right? Which is why there's an entire set of books that we're writing that I'm going to author directly, often with partners who I do it with. But there's also a second set of books, which are even more important, that we're going to author through a figure named David J. Temple, who's a pseudonym, an imaginary figure, who's going to speak for all of us. Okay, so we are on the move telling this new story of value. Right? Let me ask you a question, just checking in with everybody. Who's got an idea of what we're talking about here? I'm just going to go to the chat box. And I wanted just to kind of reset to find ourselves here. Like, what are we doing here together? So I'm just going to go to the chat box for a second if I can. Who gets it? If you get it, just give it a yes. Like, this is what we're here for. This is what we're doing, right? This is what we're creating something here, right? We're in this time between stories. We're in this time between worlds. And like Da Vinci and Ficino and Florence, right, we're coming together, right, to write this new story, right, to be this new story. Okay. So here we go. So I want to just, if I can, before Jacqueline, just 1 second, I want to just do one chant with you. Okay, like one chant with you, just so we can just kind of feel it and chant. Then Jacqueline's going to resonate the code. Then we're going to do this like huge new piece of Dharma, which I'm wildly excited. And there's not lots, there's multiple vectors. Lots is not a perfect word. Multiple vectors, that's a fancy word. There's multiple vectors of very important book writing, essay writing projects. You know, I've talked about evolutionary sense making many times. Now I'm going to mention a different one. I'm going to mention one that I'm doing with Elena, which is a book on story. And it's kind of like a fragments of the story scroll. It's about story being, right, a structure of value itself. And sometimes you tell a story, sometimes you sing a story. Okay, because to feel the story, you've got to sing the story. Okay. So if you can, I want to just, is that okay? I can just share with you a chant. Okay. And it's a very short chant, but it captures the sense of she's on the move. A chant is not a meditation where you fall into empty awareness, but you fall into throbbing desire. In a chant, you fall into the throbbing desire of Kosmos, into the music of Kosmos. And music is, I'm not going to go into the science of this. We went into the science of this summer, but actually, if you know who you are, I am music. You're actually made up of notes of music. Music emerges only after there's a manifest world. Music is a function of the laws of physics. Music is about spaces and intervals in time. You actually know who you are. We are music encoded, just like we are mathematics encoded. And Pythagoras wasn't wrong when he said that music and mathematics are flip sides of each other. Okay, so some things we can only understand through music. And my friend Terry, my dear friend Terry, right, who's he's on himself a wild, deep journey of just exploration and reading and, you know, journeying to the center of his heart. Right. So I think, and Terry, you can get mad at me later because what the heck, right? We're old friends, right? But I think, you know, in the early years, he might have cringed a little bit when I did a chant. Right, you know, first because he thinks I have a terrible voice, which he's kind of right about. But two is like, oh my God, I want to invite my friends to this thing. Why is this like Mark? He's like a good mind. Why is he chanting? So I'm hoping that maybe he cringes just a little bit less because the chant matters, right? The chant matters, right? Right. Everyone, chant is part of the structure of reality. Okay, so it goes like this. This is a chant. It doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. It's just a declaration chant, okay? And it means full joy am I when I rest in the true nature of reality. And I realize that it's alive and becoming in me, right? I'm dwelling in the temple, okay? Hey, Ashrei. It's full joy, it means Ashrei. Hey, Ashrei. Yoshvei veitecha, O Jalalucha, O Jalalucha, Hey Ashrei Yoshvei veitecha, Od Yahallelujah, Od Yahallelujah. And when I met the Dalai Lama he invited me, a story I've told you many times, I won't tell you again, to come visit him in Dharamsala. And we got together kind of in the back room there at his home in Dharamsala. You know, we chanted. And, you know, I did this chant for him. And he, of course, understood it immediately. Not the words, just, oh, beautiful. Beautiful. And then he chanted, and I said, oh, beautiful. Right? Chant takes me to the interior science, the nature of reality. Yashrei Yoshvei Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa Od Yalalucha Od Yalalucha Ashrei Yoshvei Oh, Yalalucha. Oh, Yalalucha. Wherever you're in the world, let's do it together. Hey, Ashre. Yoshve. Oh, Yalalucha. Oh, Yalalucha. Ashre Yoshve Od Yalalucha Od Yalalucha. This time, 3 more times. Hey, Ashrei, Ashrei, Yoshvei, Yoshvei, V'techa, Od Yalalucha, Od Yalalucha. Hey, Ashrei, Ashrei, Yoshvei, Yoshvei, V'techa. Od Yalalucha, Od Yalalucha, Nanina, Ashrei, Ashrei, Yoshvei, Yoshvei, V'techa, Od Yalalucha, Od Yalalucha. You might wonder, why are his hands moving? Now, if you're wondering that, you're Episcopalian, just for the record. Okay, right? But it's not bad to be Episcopalian, right? I love Episcopalians, right? So no Episcopalians get mad at me. But you go to an Episcopalian service, are we done yet? Oh. Go to a Black gospel choir. Go to a Black gospel church. Whenever I'm in a new town by myself, I look for a Black gospel church, and oh my God, they are moving and they are praying and they're alive. And in the lineage, there always has to be a shamanic dimension. You think modernity was founded on a bunch of people thinking rationally? Actually, Florence was filled with shamanism. And shamanism just means I enter into the interior structure of reality and I dance with evolution. So we don't need an ancient pre-modern shamanism, which is egocentric and massacring the next tribe and anti what we would call science, not that kind of shamanism. We need an evolutionary shamanism. And actually, Terry's wife, Betsy, sent me a book about a particular Celtic teacher, right, who's a good honorer of science, but is reintroducing the shamanic through a Celtic door, which is a beautiful door. One door of many, one mountain, many paths, right? And so we move our hands, right, because what's happening is, and maybe I'm sharing too much in public now. Let me not think or I won't share it. You can actually feel the subtle movement of reality. And with the chant, you're actually trying to reorganize reality, to fix reality. It's what you do when you paint. There's a tikkun, a true artist is expressing the joy of reality and the pain of reality, but also is telling a story. You're telling a story. When Talia is taking her picture, she's telling a story. When Krista's singing, she's telling a story. When Jacqueline is writing, she's telling a story. Right? When Jamie's writing, we're telling a story. Right? And it's a shamanic telling of a story. But the story doesn't just tell the story fixes something, it repairs something. When we tell a story and we tell a story accurately, news reporters sometimes have a sense of it. I've got to tell the story accurately. It matters. So, wow. Okay. This matters so much, my friends. The world's not made up of matter. The world is made up of what matters. Right? Oh my God. So I'm going to turn to Jacqueline, and we're probably going to have just a short time for Dharma today, but we're on the inside. I'm going to turn to Jacqueline, Lady Jacqueline, to resonate the code.
So this week's evolutionary love code. We live in a time between stories. We live in a time between worlds. We live in a time where we hold the power of ancient gods. We have the power to create worlds of unimaginable goodness, truth, and beauty. And we have the power to end worlds, to end humanity, and to end our humanity. We have no story equal to our power. And this is what we call in CosmoErotic Humanism the second shock of existence. We are here to tell a new story of value, rooted in first principles and first values. A story in which the cosmic story and the personal story are one. A new story of our power, a new universe story, a new story of our identity, a new story of desire, and a new story of communion. It is only the articulation of a new story of value that has the capacity to respond to the meta-crisis. But it is even more. The telling of a new story is the inherent natural movement of Kosmos itself. The evolution of story is the evolution of culture and consciousness, which is the evolution of love, which is the evolution of God, the manifest God. And with that, I give my word back to you, Dr. Marc.
And let's look at that code, right? Right? So let's just be in this code. And we're going to be in, I want to try and we're going to end, believe it or not, close to on time. Okay. I'm not exactly on time, but close to on time. So I want to focus on one dimension, this notion of a new story of power. Okay. A new story of power. It's a big one. Okay, who's ready to kind of like can we go deep for like the next like 6-7 minutes, no holds barred, like just like complete raw deep and create this new story? Okay. Who's in? Let me just check who's in. Are we in? Okay. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, let's see if we can go all the way here. Okay, it's hard. Okay. Who else? Anybody else in? Let's give each other a yes. Like yes. Yes, 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 yes. We're screaming yes. It's the yes of the Big Bang. Yes, 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 yes. It's about the yes. So much of spirituality today has become self-help. And self-help is, can I turn spirituality into another variety of tools that help me get more out of the world for my separate self? So spirituality gets hijacked as a self-help tool. But it's exactly not what spirituality is. Now, lots of you know that I'm not a big fan of the word spirituality by itself. That itself is a kind of strange modern word, which I don't like. A more accurate word is the interior sciences, which are empirical. We test reality, right? Through the eye of value, we have perception or valueception, right? The eye of consciousness, the eye of desire, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, means not that beauty is merely subjective, but that the eye of the beholder, the subjectivity of the beholder, the beauty, the music that lies in the beholder perceives, discloses the beauty that seems to be in the exterior world. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder means there's no exile between my inner and outer self. I've clarified my interior beauty, which clarifies my eye of perception, of valueception, of desireception, of loveception, of erosception, and I can actually see reality clearly. And then she moves my hand and I can paint. And we have this notion that only the tormented artist can paint. It's not true. The tormented artist can paint torment. The clarified artist is not the Pollyannish artist or the Cassandra artist. The clarified artist is the one who holds together her holy and broken hallelujah and paints her uncertainty on the canvas of God and paints her certainty of the goodness of it all, which causes me to be agonized by the pain of it all, right? So let's go deep for a second, okay? So most human beings don't fit into what the contemporary audience is for most of modern Western spirituality. Most unchurched modern Western spirituality is for middle to upper middle class human beings with spare change who are seeking new forms of entertainment because they've succeeded somewhat in the win-lose metrics. And now they want to fill some of the voids caused by what it took me to succeed in that win-lose metric. So I'm going to fill in some of the voids, either with romance, right? Or with, quote, spirituality, which then becomes a form of self-help. Now, romance is awesome, and self-help is important and legitimate. So I'm not deriding those two, but that's not what interior science is about. Interior science is about two things. It's about being open. It's a radical openness. And many years ago in the world of integral theory I was involved, I suggested a new term, which was open up. And I shared that term with my friend Ken Wilber and a young man then named Dustin DePerna and other people who are around. And our friend John Wellwood had talked about waking up and growing up. Waking up and growing up. And my friend Ken spoke about it in other ways, two different ways of talking about waking up and growing up. We started to talk about showing up, which I interpreted as showing up as your unique self. And then there was a lot of conversation around shadow, which is cleaning up, or I called lightening up, right? In other words, turning shadow into light. And I added opening up. You have to open up, right? We are opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the one, right? We're opening up, opening up, opening up. So interior sciences, or what we call today spirituality, is about not self-help, it's about opening up and learning to love open in all circumstances, right? And again, there's many forms of pain I have not experienced, and I pray not to experience them, right? And there's certain forms of pain where I've experienced very, very high, almost the highest, almost, but not quite, thank God, of certain verticals of pain. So I know something about pain. Right. And so I want to be able to stay open in the pain. I want to open up. That's one dimension, right? And opening up means I'm kind. It means I'm a mad lover. I don't love, I love mad. Right. And I said to my dear, he's both an initiate in our practice. He's studying with me in Holy of Holies, a beautiful man. And he's a great master in the world, actually, of journeying. My friend and student and beloved, Aubrey Marcus. And I shared with Aubrey when we first started studying, I said, I love you madly. He said, what do you mean madly? You know, madly is not love. It's the only sanity, which is to love insanely. meaning it's not ordinary love, it's the love of reality itself. We love madly. And that's got to translate into kindness, into generosity. I have to be generous. I've got to paint and share my painting all over the world. Right? I got to paint my love and paint my beauty and paint my finances and paint my resources and paint my energy and share. Genuine share. I want to share. I want to give. I'm radically generous. So there's a generosity to spirituality. But 3, and this is the one I want to talk about for a couple of minutes, not just a couple of minutes, is I have to be powerful. And maybe there's not enough time to talk about it this week. So let me just put it on the table and we'll spend all next week on power. I have to be powerful. Right? In other words, a person who's imbued with spirit has to be power hungry. If you are not power hungry, you are not a spiritual person. Clear? It's a shocking statement. If you're not power hungry, you are unspiritual, you are unkind, you are closed. People who are not power hungry are not spiritual. I stand by that sentence. A person who is not power hungry is not spiritual. We need to be power hungry. Okay? It's like, wow. So what does that mean? Okay, so I'm just going to close with one sentence, just to give an image of it, and then we're going to spend all next week on power. Okay, next week is about power. Good. I just want to get the sentence clear. If you're not power hungry, you are not spiritual. So if you feel that drive for power and you say, oh, that's my ego. No, the ego does try and usurp and hijack the drive for power. But that's not the drive for power. The drive for power is authentic. There's a reason why all the great interior scientists called the divine the infinity of power. It's not because power is simply abusive and God's the ultimate abuser. That's not exactly why. It's a deeper reason. Power is an elixir. It's a sacred elixir. Power, you want to be powerful, right? And the highest level of pleasure, and that's a different conversation. We have one of our books in the Great Library is about pleasure and ethics. And there's 6 levels of pleasure, and the highest level is the pleasure of power. Okay? But I'm just going to give you, so I'm not going to go into what that means this week, which is a little bit radical. I apologize, but I want to kind of honor the time and move into prayer. But let me at least give you an image, okay? Is that okay? Okay, just everyone okay? I've got a moment for an image? Okay. Okay, like, oh my God. And I shared this a little bit, with my colleague, Andrew, when we did a conversation on this past Thursday. And Andrew, if you're listening, we didn't get to do our after talk because I had some blood test work that day. Right? I was just doing just a standard checkup, which I haven't done one for many years. So they had to take like enough blood for it was like the vampire day. They stick a needle in, they just kept pumping and pumping. I'm like, really? Are we doing this all day? Right. So sorry, Andrew, I'm sorry I missed our meeting afterwards, and I look forward to meeting Monday or Tuesday morning, in case you happen to be watching. Okay. So I shared with Andrew this thing on power. So my family, I lost most of my immediate family in the end of World War II. My parents are both European. They were both participated in different dimensions of what's called the Holocaust. And one of the stories that I grew up on, my mother was part of my mother's milk, were her personal stories of horror, which I've alluded to in passing. I'm not going to mention now. But it was also the stories of people close in the family. And these stories went through all of Poland. Poland began with 3 million practitioners of Hebrew wisdom and ended with, maybe 100,000. Everyone was killed, right? It's unimaginable that the ostensibly most civilized nation in the world, Wagner, the best Bach and Beethoven, right, became the most degraded expressions of human beings, right? And so the Jews were marching to the gas chambers. And it's 1944, and 12,000 Jews are being gassed every day in Auschwitz, right? And the Allies could easily bomb them, but they don't. And David Wyman wrote a book a Christian scholar in Massachusetts, called The Abandonment of the Jews. It's must reading if you want to understand realpolitik. And so it's not being bombed. And they're surrounded by Nazi guards. And the guards seem to be powerful. They're holding machine guns. They're filled with power. So it seems. And the Jews, mothers with their babies, are walking to their deaths. And they're singing. Not all of them. People were horror-stricken. But many were able to find this. And they sang, Ani ma'ami. I trust. Be'emuna shelema. With complete trust. Be'viat HaMashiach. Ani ma'ami. Ve'af al pi she'yitmamea im kol zeh. אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא, בכל יום שיבוא, ואף על פי שיתממע עם כל זה, אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא, בכל Yom Sheyavo, which means I trust, with complete trust, Beviat HaMashiach, that Homo Amor will emerge, the Messiah will come, but Messiah means the emergence of a new human and a new humanity. Va'afal pishit mamea, and even though yitmamea literally means the Messiah, Homo Amor, this emergence of this new human may tarry. It may take a long time, but it also means tamua, even though it seems radically amazing and impossible. No. Im kol zeh, nonetheless, achakelo, I'm going to wait, but not a waiting for Godot. Not Samuel Beckett's waiting for Godot. It's waiting. It's active waiting. It's activist waiting. I'm poised. It's the waiting before explosion and sexuality. I'm fully alive. I'm fully aroused. I'm waiting. I'm merging. I'm participating in, right? I'm loving reality open in every literal second. I'm waiting because at any minute, it can happen. The nature of history, not that there's going to be a man riding on a white donkey. It's that there's going to be a unique self-symphony, a self-organizing, self-actualizing cosmos that will itself, right, generate a new human and a new humanity with a whole new source code of value that transforms reality step by step. Trust. Now let me ask you a question. Who was powerful in that moment? The Nazi guard or the singing Jews? Well, let me ask you a question. How many Nazi guards are left in the world, right? There are some neo-Nazis in the world, and there's lots of anti-Semitism. But those Nazi guards and their lineage aren't in the world, right? Looked like they had the power. The Nazi guards were powerless. They were pathetic. They were utterly without real power. And the mother holding her baby, the man holding his wife's hand, the man or woman walking by themselves, singing Ani Ma'amin, filled with power. Power that reverberated and resonated above and below. Power that changed reality in every dimension, that changed the cosmos itself. Wow. That's what it means to be power hungry. It means a lot more than that, but that's the beginning of what it means. Right?